Hi, everyone. Just getting something set up here while we wait for more people to join us. Please say hello in the chat so I know who's here. Mr. Davis, hi, it's good to see you this week. I'm glad you're able to join us this week. I know last week you had something else that you wanted to do, but it's good to see you here tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Let's see who else is here. I think we're going to have a good time tonight talking about the fight for free speech and the importance of allowing freedom of expression. My dog Rex, yes, be sure to hit the like button and share button so more people can learn about history from Mrs. Q. Mr. Tellett, good evening, Mrs. Q. Good evening to you. Miss Frederick, Mrs. Q, excited to finally catch you live. Hi. That's great. I'll be seeing Miss Frederick, I believe, next Tuesday at an 18th century ladies event that we're doing. Hello, Hannah. We are having a good night here, or we're having a pretty good night. I got dressed. I look pretty decent. I have a good presentation ready to go. So all of that means I'm having a pretty good night. My lights are working. Let's see, my green screen is up. So we're all set. And I, of course, am always excited to bring you some sort of story about 18th century America. Hello, Miss Turley in Indiana. It's so great to have everyone here. I thought it would be a really great time to talk about something I haven't really talked about with you very much, and that is all of the things that happened in New York to secure our right to free speech and free exchange of ideas in the public forum, and why that is so important. Um, uh, oh, it's a Janice and Richard, or oh, I'm a good old rebel now. It's always wonderful to have my friends from the South joining us. Um, so that is always fun for me to have my Southern friends here as well. So Mr. Q and I this week took a trip to the northern part of New York State to visit a friend. And this is a true story in 2025. And it was a really beautiful trip upstate New York, all the way up through the Hudson Valley, through the Catskills and north. And for me, it was really fun to be in New York again because it's been a while since I've been in New York. And here he is, our wolf doggy, Quintus. Quintus Maximus is here. And he was the reason we took our trip because a friend of ours in Boston Lake had him for a few days for some boarding and training. And she did a really wonderful job for us. And so little doggy Q, actually big doggy Q, took a little vacation for a few days and got some touch up on his training because he is a very big wolf doggy, and he needs to understand his place. Here he is, he's coming back in, going back and forth. Mr. Q should have a little bit better control of him. Oh, sounds like he laid down. Let me look. Yep, looks like he's laying down by my feet, so he's being a good boy. So let's get on with it. So let's talk about how New York won the right to free speech and won the right for newspapers to print virtually anything they wanted to print, and why that right was so important, and how did it lead to the rebellion against the colonies. So let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, and by the way, I'm dressed for fall. It's nice and cool, and I always get lots of compliments when I wear this quilted jacket, which is very comfy and very pretty. The colors are really nice. I think I look great in these colors. So it's a very nice jacket to wear. So how did this all come about? I mean, in the American colonies, did we have the right to print anything we wanted to print? Could we say anything we wanted to say about our elected officials or even our appointed officials? And what happened when people did try to do that? Well, it got off to a bit of a rocky start, as you might imagine. Miss Silver says, "Hi, Mrs. Q, good to see you. I really like that revolutionary parlor. This is a beautiful room. I wish it was my real parlor, but it's not. But it is really quite beautiful, white and nice and bright. So I really like this background. I use all different historical rooms for my backgrounds, and I've just been using this one a lot lately. Mr. White is here. Good evening, Mr. White. So initially, when we in the colonies decided to criticize our elected and appointed officials, didn't go over quite so well, did it? Mr. Facemeyer is here from Manassas, Virginia. Hello. Didn't go over quite that well because, we were the colonies, and England didn't feel so warm toward us criticizing them, and the governors especially did not feel so warm and approving of us criticizing our governors. Now, keep in mind, right, the governors were all appointed by the monarch. We didn't elect our governors. We elected our local legislatures, but our governors were all appointed by the crown, and they served for what was called pleasure, meaning as long as the crown wanted them to serve, they served. And if the monarch decided they didn't want them anymore, they removed them and replaced them, except in some of the more difficult to govern colonies like New York, where many of them quit and went home on their own. And you'll be seeing why in a minute. Very terrible being a colonial governor of New York, because New Yorkers have always been nearly impossible to govern and very outspoken about what we think. So the first governor to really feel the wrath of New York, or I should say the first governor to feel the wrath of New York in the printed word, was Governor William Cosby. LB Girl 88 is here. Hello. I'm glad you're here as well. And this was the newspaper that got the whole issue started with Governor Cosby. This was John Peter Zenger's New York Weekly Journal, and you might see the date up on there is 1735. So going back quite a ways now. Now, William Cosby was one of a long line of governors appointed to govern the colony of New York. And the successful governors of New York were the governors who understood a number of different things. Most importantly, business. New York has always been about making money. So when the governor is good about making money and is good about doing things that enhance the ability of New Yorkers to engage in trade and wealth, we're generally pretty happy with a governor. We also like governors to respect our differences, as we are not all from England, Ireland, or Scotland in New York. We have people from many different places. So a governor who can deal with all of the differences of people in New York and understand the importance of commerce to New York generally will do a pretty good job. But a governor who is small-minded and thin-skinned and corrupt might have some problems. And that is what happened to Governor William Cosby in this issue of the New York Weekly Journal. So the New York Weekly Journal was, as I mentioned, published by John Peter Zenger, a printer here in New York, and his wife, Anna Zenger. And in this issue, they came out with a series of anonymously written articles all about Governor Cosby, his council, and corruption. And it's written in a very satirical and funny manner, rather insulting. And everyone, of course, knew it was about Governor Cosby and knew what the content was all about. And as you can imagine, the governor was not happy about this. So he had Mr. Zenger charged with seditious libel and jailed for the newspaper. He had most of the issues of the newspaper burned on Wall Street, saving only or preserving only a few to be used at trial against Mr. Zenger. Now, the case against Zenger at trial would be that the newspaper was seditious, meaning turning people against the government, and it was libelous against the governor. And that his only defense would be that he didn't print it. But of course, everyone knew he printed it. But that isn't quite the way the trial went. As you can imagine, it's a New York story and has lots of wonderful twists and turns. Well, the first thing that happened was Mr. Zenger had a bail hearing, and two of New York's finest lawyers, Mr. Smith and Mr. Alexander, went to court to argue for fair bail for Mr. Zenger, as the magistrate before had set his bail at 10 times the amount he could afford. So Mr. Smith and Mr. Alexander went to court, and they argued that bail was not meant to keep a man in prison, but simply to keep a man from fleeing justice and his judgment, right? So you put up your money or your property, and that guarantees you won't run away before judgment is found for or against you. And they said it was against the ideals of the common law that bail would be set at 100 times what he could afford. Not only that, but they also argued, and this is a little bit of a side issue that gets deep into the politics of what's going on in this newspaper, but they also argued that one of the justices was illegally appointed to the court by the governor, which he likely was, and that another justice had been illegally removed from the court. So there's a little hanky-panky going on with the court as well and the governor, but I don't want to get sidetracked for you with all that. Maybe one night I'll do a full piece on the Zenger trial so you can understand the ins and outs of it. But for tonight, just let's say that Smith and Alexander went to argue for fair bail and that one of the judges should recuse himself because he wasn't legally sitting on the bench. There were 3 justices on the bench. And they said, we'll rule the next day. So everybody comes back the next day, and the judges upheld Zenger's bail and disbarred Mr. Smith and Mr. Alexander, disbarred them from all practice in New York, both their criminal and civil practice. And they then appointed a novice lawyer to defend Mr. Zenger. So at that time, Smith and Alexander and Mrs. Zenger went to Philadelphia, and they interviewed a lawyer there, Mr. Andrew Hamilton. Andrew Hamilton at the time was the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly and known as the greatest trial lawyer in all of the colonies. And Mr. Hamilton took the case free of charge because he knew how important it would be. Now, this is no relation to later Alexander Hamilton, who I also will be talking about tonight. It's a different Hamilton, lots of Hamiltons. So this is Andrew Hamilton. Andrew Hamilton came to New York and he defended Mr. Zenger. And there were all kinds of antics in this trial. So when they went to seat the jury for the trial, all the men's names as potential in the jury pool all worked for the Delancey family in some way. And the Delancey family, of course, were royalists and were supporters of Governor Cosby. So immediately upon seeing that, Mr. Hamilton objected and demanded a new list of jurors be presented. And they eventually did seat a jury. Now, as I said, the prosecution against Mr. Zenger was going to be that he printed it, it was libel, and it would cause sedition or rebellion. Mr. Hamilton had some other ideas about that, and he argued some other things. One of the things he said was, we don't deny that Mr. Zenger printed this newspaper. Here it is. He printed it. We have no denial of that. He absolutely printed it. So let's just forget that part of the argument. But the question is it a libel? And he set out to show that everything in here was true and that the suppression of the truth would take us back to the reign of King James II and his secret trials called Star Chambers. And I don't want to get too much into that as well. But this went on for 9 months. Now, in 1735, the court didn't meet every day as it does in your time. So they would meet for a couple days, take some time off, meet for a couple days. So what was the purpose, do you think, of the court setting bail so high that Mr. Zenger would have to stay in jail for such a long time, 9 months? Well, of course, it was to keep the newspaper from being printed. They figured if Mr. Zenger was sitting behind bars, he couldn't print the newspaper. But they forgot about Mrs. Zenger, who printed the newspaper every week while her husband was in jail, meeting with him in the jail, going over the submissions to the newspaper and picking them together and putting the newspaper together every week. And she printed it with an apprentice in the shop. So no issues of the weekly journal were missed, even though Mr. Zenger was in jail for the whole duration of the trial. Well, when it came to the closing arguments of the trial, Andrew Hamilton asked the jury, he said, "You're thinking, intelligent, successful men. Does it make sense to you that we should judge truth and falsehood in the same way?" As the prosecutor had argued that it didn't matter if this was true or false. Either way, it would cause sedition and be libelous against the governor. And he said, in fact, if it was truthful, it was even more dangerous than if it was a lie. In his closing arguments, Mr. Hamilton said, of course, this is nonsense. How can we judge truth and falsehood the same way? And isn't it true that the only way that we have to keep an eye on the Crown's appointees and what they're up to is through a truthful and unlimited press? The jury deliberated for 15 minutes and they nullified the libel law. Oh, something called jury nullification that I don't think you learn a lot about in your time. So the jurors looked at it and they said, the law is flawed. and through jury nullification, nullified the law. And the law was then changed to say that in New York, a libel was only a libel if it was knowingly false. In other words, the printer could only be held for libel if he knew he was printing a falsehood. Mr. Zenger was freed. Mr. Hamilton was given a parade and the keys to the city, and the free press was established in the city of New York in 1735, 1736. And what happened after that? Well, everybody printed whatever they wanted to print, even if it was false, claiming, I didn't know it was false. I can't be held liable for this. And of course, since everything's printed under pseudonym, they didn't know who the author was either. So this opened the door to a raucous era of debate in print in the colony of New York. So it all begins with John Peter Zenger's weekly journal, and John Peter Zenger himself, who spent 9 months of his life in jail, and his wife, Mrs. Zenger, who put out the newspaper so that we could have the guarantee of the free press today. So don't forget Mr. Zenger. Let's see, what do we have next? I don't really remember what I put in here. Oh, the Independent Reflector. And of course, these are all newspapers that are before me, but we all in New York know the story of the Weekly Journal and Mr. Zenger. Now, the Independent Reflector happened to be a newspaper that my father very much enjoyed. He kept all of the issues. There weren't that many issues. He kept every issue. And as I was growing up and being educated, he read the articles in these with me because many of them are about civic responsibility, the duties of government, the role education plays, all sorts of interesting subjects like that. So he thought it was important for me to know these things, and we would use the Independent Reflector as a study guide. Now, the Independent Reflector was published by 3 lawyers, Mr. William Livingston, Mr. William Smith Jr., who is the junior of the William Smith who argued in the Zenger trial. So we have a little bit of a generational thing here, and Mr. John Moran Scott. And these 3 gentlemen published the Independent Reflector. They had a law firm together, and depending on whether or not you liked them, you might have different names for them. So if you liked these 3 men, you might call them the Whig Triumvirate because politically they were of the Whig persuasion. If you didn't like them, you might call them the Wicked Triumvirate. And you might mention that some of them were educated at the nursery of sedition and rebellion, Yale, as Mr. Livingston was educated at Yale. And of course, the British, the Anglicans, did not like Yale. And they didn't like Princeton or the College of New Jersey very much either. Both of those schools were Presbyterian. So you can see there's a little bit of conflict there brought over from England. So the Independent Reflector often wrote articles that angered everyone in the city. And my father taught me that if somebody is saying things and everyone is mad at them, there's a good likelihood they're telling the truth. He said, if someone is giving their opinions and only one side is angry at them, well, they're probably biased toward the side that likes them, right? He says, but if a man or a lady is speaking and many people are angry at them, they're likely telling the truth. And so he had me study the Independent Reflector. Now, the Independent Reflector eventually got into another controversy, like the Weekly Journal before them, although nobody went to jail over this. But they did publish a series of articles critical of the opening of King's College. King's College was being proposed by Trinity Church, the Church of England, and it would be an Anglican school. And the gentleman in the Independent Reflector argued that, of course, we would love to have a school in New York, as we as gentlemen all value education. And we know that the more educated our men are, the more prosperity that will bring to our city, which will bring more opportunities for more men to find success. So, of course, we're in favor of education. It's this type of education which we are questioning, that the school will be an Anglican school. And of course, Yale was a Presbyterian school, and the College of New Jersey was a Presbyterian school. But they have an objection to this Anglican school, and not because it's Anglican. They said, of course, the students will be brought up in the beliefs of the Anglican Church and will be likely to support the Crown's views and things. And when the time comes that they can vote, be more likely to vote in ways that favor the Crown. And they said, and even in this, we are not wholly in objection. But what we are in objection to is that it's being built with taxpayer money and will be supported with taxpayer money. And they said that only 17% of us in New York are Anglicans. So why should everyone else pay a tax to support a religious school, a religion they do not worship? And this began a massive newspaper war back and forth between the Independent Reflector and Hugh Gaines' newspaper, which was the Weekly Mercury. And they went back and forth. The triumvirate versus the rector of Trinity Church, Reverend Auchmuty at the time. And Mr. Auchmuty, or Reverend Auchmuty, argued back, well, listen to these Presbyterians. They would have our young men educated without God. Why, we'll have immoral anarchy among the young men of this town if you listen to these Presbyterians. And they went back and forth. And of course, the Church of England, being no fools, realized that in New York, sometimes the best way forward is to make a deal, right? To make a deal. Let's make a deal. And they did. And the deal was that the Church of England would open the school. It would be Anglican. They would allow young men of all religious backgrounds to attend the school. And after they had a number of graduating classes, they would then start seeking support from their graduates. They would also offer positions on their board to gentlemen who were not Anglicans. And with that deal, King's College opened, which in your time, I believe, is called Columbia University. So here's an instance where free debate in the public forum between the Independent Reflector and the Weekly Mercury led to a compromise which turned out to suit everyone and to educate many young men. And you might know not all of those young men were loyalists or Tories during the Revolutionary War. Some were Tories, some were Whigs. So it turned out to be a good thing for everyone. So in this way, open debate leads to a compromise. What do I have next to show you? Oh, to the betrayed inhabitants of the city and colony of New York. So we're going to jump from King's College in 1754 to 1769. And another controversy, and someone who did go to jail. This broadside came out to the betrayed inhabitants of the city and colony of New York at the end of the year 1769. And this is about a lot of different things that were going on at the time. One thing I'm sure you know about is the Quartering Act and the colony's refusal to quarter troops among them and raise money for the quartering of the troops. So this is about the Quartering Act. It's in part about New York breaking the unity of the colonies to support the Quartering Act in New York. And this is where the problems begin. So the gentleman who writes this, who calls himself only a son of liberty, says that, New York is a shame that all of the other colonies have united against raising any money against the Quartering Act. But here we have New York, whose legislature has raised the money for the troops in New York, breaking the unity of the colonies and turning all of the other colonies against us. And they did turn against us. They had a funeral march for us at Princeton, the College of New Jersey, and Philadelphia sent us what is now an amusing letter that said, please send us your Liberty Pole, as it seems you no longer have a use for one. And as the other colonies were enraged, the Son of Liberty issued his broadside. Now it's 2 pages long, so it's quite long, and it goes into many things, including his proposal to everyone that the reason the assembly appropriated the money is because it was now inhabited by a majority of Tories or loyalists, and that these Tories won their seats through voter fraud. Through voter fraud. He says, and of course, all of the new people on the assembly who were voted in by voter fraud all are members of the Delancey faction. And the Delanceys, of course, being loyalists and being close to the crown, which is how they have been rewarded their lucrative trading routes and property, are, of course, going to support the crown rather than the people who elected them. He said, this assembly cares nothing about you, because if they did, they would stand with our brothers in the other colonies against the Quartering Act. But by raising this money, they've shown that all they care about is the family through whose wealth, power, and patronage they have their positions, the Delanceys. Oh, we have a message, Lon. Miss Silver says, did any of these issues with printing truths, etc., affect Ben Franklin in any way? Since he was a successful printer, did he have to deal with this? You know, Franklin was in Philadelphia, and I don't think they had the level of royalists in Philadelphia that we had in New York. New York was the most loyal city to the crown in the colonies, with a very wealthy and powerful loyalist faction. So I can't say 100% because I'm not sure, maybe someone listening knows, but I don't think Mr. Franklin dealt with this. I also, though, don't know if he printed anything as serious as this either. So I really can't say about Philadelphia. So, of course, the Delanceys do control the assembly. They're not happy about this at all. So the assembly issues a proclamation saying they'll give a very large cash reward to anyone who will reveal to them the Son of Liberty, the author of the broadside. And a gentleman comes forward and he says, I don't know who wrote it, but I can tell you who printed it because I'm an apprentice in that print shop and I saw it hanging to dry. So everyone in that print shop was arrested, including the owner, Mr. James Parker. They were locked up in Fort George in separate cells. They were interrogated one at a time. And Mr. Parker, saying he feared for his very life, gave up the author of the broadside. And the author is part of the reason this thing blew up into a major New York event. It was Captain Alexander McDougall, a ship captain and totally self-made man. Now, in 1769, the British Parliament is not fond of the self-made men of America because they're saying things like, what do we need this corrupt Parliament for? Look around. Everything we have here, we've built ourselves. And Captain McDougall indeed had said that at a meeting at the New York Chamber of Commerce. He said, look around you. Everything we have, we've built ourselves with our own hard work and determination. What do we need the Parliament for? We can do everything ourselves. And someone asked him, well, Captain McDougall, I might agree with you on all those points, but if we don't have the King's great navy to protect our ships at sea, who would protect them? And Captain McDougall responded, why, if you don't fly the King's flag, his enemies no longer will be yours, which is considered sedition in 1769. So now they know that Captain McDougall, who was a thorn in their side already, very popular leader, I also should say, very wealthy, popular leader. Well, now they know he wrote the broadside and they arrest him and they charge him with sedition for writing the broadside and they throw him into jail. And he's going to be in jail for about 4 months. And I should just mention here that the arrest warrant that they used to arrest Captain McDougall was number 45. 45 already had great significance to the patriots in America, as it was the number of an issue of a pamphlet printed in London by Mr. John Wilkes, who was a big supporter of the people here. And for my friends in Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre is named for him, isn't it, Mr. John Wilkes? And Wilkes University named for him. John Wilkes had printed, at that time, he was printing a journal called the North Briton, which was critical of the aristocracy. And number 45 was deemed to be so radical and pornographic that he was jailed for it. And they had to let him go because he had privileges as a member of Parliament. They couldn't jail him. They had to let him go. And then he sued the magistrates that came to his house to arrest him for invading on his private property. So John Wilkes was a character. But because it was number 45, the number 45 was very popular in America. And you may have seen some cartoons of the Sons of Liberty with number 45 on their cap. or people carrying a banner with a 45. That's what the 45 is all about. It's for John Wilkes and the number 45. So now Captain McDougall became the Wilkes of the colonies, and people went to the jail every day to cheer for him. And they cheered 45 times, or they toasted 45 times. And on the 45th day he was in jail, they started the day with starting a fire and roasting 45 pounds of meat. They then toasted 45 times, and they brought 45 virgins dressed in white to recite the 45th Psalm in his honor. One of the opposing newspapers laughed at the whole thing, and they said, we know that, the Sons of Liberty are up to their usual lies and deceptions with these 45 virgins who all appear to be 45 years old. So quite a bit of fun. Now, Captain McDougall stayed in jail for 4 months while this was all going on, and eventually was released because the only eyewitness that he printed the broadside was Mr. Parker, who died of natural causes. And of course, people accused the Sons of Liberty of murdering him, but they didn't kill him. He simply died. And no witness, right? No British common law, no witness to a crime. There is no crime. And he was the only witness. You couldn't be forced to be witness against yourself. So Captain McDougall was released, and a parade of men marched him home. So Captain McDougall triumphs over being jailed for telling everyone the truth in a broadside. So we have that episode came about. Now, when Captain McDougall was in jail, a response to the whole thing was also printed, because I do want to show you different sides of things so that you know that there are many different voices in New York during our time who are speaking freely and maybe annoying each other, but are all speaking freely. And so the soldiers had something to say about this. And they put up their own broadside around the town. And this is when Captain McDougall was in jail. And they said, God and a soldier all men do adore, in time of war, but not before. When war is over and all things righted, God is forgotten and the soldier is slighted. And they went on here to insult the Sons of Liberty. And one of the greatest things they did in here was they would not write out the word Sons of Liberty or even Liberty Boys. They would do an S and a dash and of L dash, and they would do an L dash boys, because they said just the name of this organization was so profane, it could not be mentioned in public. And then they went on to greatly insult the Sons of Liberty in this broadside. And this is the 16th Regiment of Foot, who at that time were housed up on the Commons. So this was being put up all over New York. And what do you think happened? They ran into some members of the Sons of Liberty who were greatly insulted in this, and they all got into a brawl. And the brawl became the worst riot in the city up until that time. We call it the Battle of Golden Hill, and it occurred in January 1770, with residents and soldiers brutally fighting with each other, many serious injuries, and miraculously no one was killed. So we have, some free speech leading to some clashes here in the city of New York, but no one tried to keep anyone from speaking. I'll convert to my modern self for a moment and tell you, I used to show all of these on my tour, and someone asked me once about the broadsides, which would be, pasted up all over the town, and whether or not the opposing side would tear down broadsides they didn't like. And they did not. They did not, because in Mrs. Q's time, that is an act of cowardice. Preventing someone else from talking is an act of cowardice. In my time, you debate them. You express your own superior debate, logic, and persuasion skills by writing your own and putting that one up. And you go back and forth and debate, because the object is to use your superior abilities to convince the public that your argument is the one they want to believe, not the other one. So no, we did not tear down each other's broadsides. We continued the debate instead. Let's see, what do I have next? We have a comment from Ms. Turley. Modern Times historian Professor Joanne Freeman has been referring to the present protests as liberty polls. That is very interesting. Well, this was about the Liberty Poll. The soldiers said the Sons of Liberty were just drunks and dregs whose entire identity was based a wooden pole stuck in the ground that they worshiped weekly like an idol. So you have a little bit of criticism of the Sons of Liberty protesting at their Liberty poles and being called idolaters in this for worshiping the pole. There's some wonderful dialogue going on in my time. It would be wonderful if you could spend some time reading some of it. I know it's difficult for you because of the language and the time period references to different things, but the language is wonderful. And the idea was if you were insulted in a broadside, that you put out your own. And, I have visions of the gentlemen sitting at the merchant's coffee house, laughing at a broadside that insults them, and sitting there and saying, okay, here's our response. Let's say this. No, 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 let's say this. This is even better. And you can bet that if you are the subject of a broadside, every foolish thing you've ever done in your life will be exposed in that broadside. So it is a really serious business, the debates going on in these. Well, what do we have next? Oh, we have Mr. Miles Cooper's friendly address to all reasonable Americans about the political confusion of our time. Miles Cooper was the president of King's College, and he published a number of these pamphlets talking about all of the dissent going on between the colonies and the mother country, and different ways that that dissent could be addressed without rebellion. And this angered the Sons of Liberty, and they went and tried to break into King's College to grab Miles Cooper and likely hang him up on the Liberty pole, which is one of the things they did. And a young student named Alexander Hamilton and his roommate, Robert Troup, stopped the crowd long enough for Mr. Cooper to jump out of a window and run to a friend's home, where he stayed for a couple of days until it was safe to go back to work. So we can see Miles Cooper writing this pamphlet and the angry Sons of Liberty going after him for what he said in here. Most of this is very, very reasonable. Mr. Cooper was pointing out the dangers of a non-importation, non-exportation agreement and how that might cause long-term, if not eternal, suffering for some of the types of things we exported from the colonies. We have Mr. White says, if we could only accept that style of debate today. Mr. White, I hear that you have lost the style of debate in it, and it pains me greatly to hear that, because we fought so hard in our time to protect this. We have Miles Cooper, and who do we have next? Oh, we have the Rights of the Colonies examined by Mr. Stephen Hopkins of Rhode Island. A wonderful pamphlet published during the time that Boston was militarily occupied on the rights of the people of the colonies. Wait a minute, this might be a little earlier than that. Can I see the date? Oh, this is 65. This is during the Stamp Act. This is 1765. So this is during the Stamp Act, with Mr. Stephen Hopkins reminding everyone what the responsibility of the Parliament was to the people who settled the colonies. And he says that one of the responsibilities and one of the things guaranteed to the people who came here was, in light of the hard lives they would be living, that they would be guaranteed rights as subjects of the crown. And if they had come from the British Empire, they were guaranteed those rights as subjects of the crown at the time they landed. If they came from other countries, they were guaranteed those rights after 7 years. And that this was a gift bestowed on the people of the colonies for the hardship that they would endure to settle the colonies, which would bring great wealth to England. So this was something England promised and owed. And that the Stamp Act was a violation of the promise of our rights as subjects of the crown. So here's Mr. Hopkins writing this in 1765. And I'm sure many people didn't like it, but he was not jailed for it. And people argued against it, of course, but he was not jailed for it. This is very eloquent, by the way, and you can find this in your time. The Rights of the Colonies Examined by Stephen Hopkins. It's not difficult to read. I think you would all understand it. And Mr. Hopkins was a brilliant man, signed the Declaration of Independence, and refused to ratify the United States Constitution. He was an anti-federalist later. Who do we have next after Mr. Hopkins? Oh, here we go. Two of our newspaper mastheads. James Rivington's New York Gazetteer, or Weekly Advertiser, and John Holt's New York Journal, or General Advertiser. And look at the mastheads of these newspapers. Right away, you can tell they're on different sides, can't you? As Mr. Rivington has the King's Arms, and Mr. Holt has Unite or Die. So you know right away where these newspapers stand on all of the issues they'll be discussing. Don't think that in my time newspapers are objective. Of course they're not. They all carry the beliefs of the printer. There's no objectivity in newspapers. Mr. Holt is a rebel. You can see right here, he's a supporter of the Sons of Liberty. Unite or die. Mr. Rivington is a Tory. He supports the crown. And some of you might know he will continue to support the crown through the occupation of New York and the Revolutionary War. So both of these gentlemen publish weekly. Their offices are across the street from each other, and their newspapers engage in rigorous insults of each other every week. And no one wants anyone arrested. No one destroys any, well, for a time, no one destroys anyone's printing press until the Sons of Liberty become out of control, and they do destroy Mr. Rivington's printing press, which is a wrong thing to do, which many of us were opposed to. But for the most part, for many years, they work right across the street from each other, and they spar back and forth every week, printing all sorts of things about each other. And we are just used to that, and we appreciate that because we know that if we can read Mr. Rivington's opinions about things and his supporters, and we can read Mr. Holt's opinions about things and his supporters, somewhere in there, we find what we ourselves think. And we are happy to have the different opinions from which to choose. Because if all the opinions were just the Crown's opinions, we might not be doing what's in the best interest of ourselves. And if all the opinions are the Sons of Liberty's opinions, we might not be doing what's in the best interest of ourselves. But if we have all those opinions to select from, of course, we're not all going to agree with the same opinions, but on the whole, we'll find a middle ground and find some compromise in how we believe, until things, of course, get so bad that we can't compromise and we rebel against the crown. But this is for decades leading up to that, of which I'm speaking tonight. And speaking of Mr. Rivington, I'd like to close with an episode of Mr. Rivington's newspaper lampooning the Sons of Liberty. As the Sons of Liberty had become so angry with Mr. Rivington for what he'd been printing, that they hanged an effigy of him over in New Jersey. And Mr. Rivington published an engraving of himself hanging in a tree, and then an incredibly funny and amusing, insulting depiction of the Sons of Liberty, who he calls the dregs of the city. You might call them lowlifes. He calls them pediculous, lice-infested. He calls them drunk, bacchanalians, naked nature worshippers. And he says they're inebriated, they're drunk, not on the juice of the vine, not on wine, but cheap New England rum. And he says they're clearly incapable of understanding I'm doing my job as a free and honorable printer. Very good. It's quite fun to read. Unfortunately, the Sons of Liberty then went and destroyed Mr. Rivington's printing press, which was not a good reaction. And many of us who were Whigs and supporters of the Sons of Liberty in general did not support the destruction and intimidation of Mr. Rivington. So this is just a small sample of the debate, the rigorous, open, free debate that went on in the city of New York throughout the 18th century. Oh, and maybe next week I'll continue with the debate upon ratification of the Constitution, because this, my friends, is mild compared to what happened when it was time to ratify the Constitution. So we New Yorkers love our ability to debate in open public, listen to many different opinions, discuss them, maybe argue with them among each other, and then reach some sort of compromise that benefits everyone. So thank you so much for joining me tonight here in Hanover Square. It is always such a pleasure to have you. I look forward to it very much, having you. And if you have any questions or comments before we say goodnight, please just put them in the comments box, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm working on, as I mentioned before, I'm slowly working on putting a Patreon together where you can support my work and get all of these supporting documents that I do every week with Live with Mrs. Q. Also, don't forget this Sunday night at 9 p.m. I will be on republicbroadcastingnetwork.org, RBN, for my Sunday night radio show. And I also eventually will be putting documents that support that show on my upcoming Patreon page. I got a little bit behind this week. I'm sorry with that, because of, driving back and forth with Mr. Q's wolf doggy, taking him up to our friend Mrs. Fraunhofer, and then going all the way back up to pick him up. Ms. Queller says, thank you, excellent. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I hope you have a good week. I hope some of you will join me on Sunday night on Republic Broadcasting Network. Otherwise, I will see you again next Thursday here in my home in Hanover Square.